Hello and welcome everyone to the third part of Nightmares Run Deep. This part is for BokuAkaKuroKen as you voted on the community post. If you too want to influence what videos I should make next, either check out the community tab or the Discord, or even better, put in a request yourself with the request form in the description, and now I hope you enjoy. One more thing before we start, there is a warning for serious injuries and slight gore, so to say, so be aware of that. His breath was knocked out of his lungs. He couldn't stop shaking. Everything around him seemed to be shrouded in an odd, thick mist. It was eerily silent. Every noise seemed muffled as if he was underwater. A rushing echoed in his ears and he had a hard time deciphering what was going on. He trained his eyes on the blurry domain surrounding him. He couldn't have gone that far. There must be something familiar in reach. Suddenly, he felt a presence just beside him. Not like someone was sneaking up on him, but as though they appeared by his side out of thin air. An ice-cold gush of wind followed the sensation and shivers haunted on his spine. He turned around abruptly, ready to fight, when he was met with the yellow-golden eyes. Eyes he'd recognized everywhere. Kyoutaro! Relief flooded his system and he lowered his guard. Finally, he had found something familiar. Someone. He stopped. Bokuto didn't look like himself. He was angry. The type of silent anger Kuroo had only seen on him a handful of times. A shadow lay over his face and he stared at him with burning hatred. Kuroo never before felt small around the ace, but right now, he did. Why didn't you save me? You could have. So why didn't you? He didn't raise his voice, but his tone caused him to freeze in place nonetheless. His stomach twisted. Save you? What? He tried to make sense of the picture before him when suddenly the sound of water drops falling and landing in a puddle drew his attention downward. No, not water. Blood. From Bokuto's chest and hands ran rivers of deep red assembling into a puddle to his feet. His clothes were soaked. Everywhere Kuroo looked, he only saw red. How? His voice came out choked, and he could feel his throat closing rapidly as he stumbled forward to press his hand to the wound in his chest. He reached him, held him just long enough for them to get coated in the deep crimson, when suddenly the aces closed around his wrist and pulled him off. No, Ko, we need to... He was full on sobbing now, weakly trying to fight against Bokuto's grip that was stronger than it should have been for someone actively bleeding out. It's no use. You should have saved me when you had the chance. Now, you're just useless. His anger cut like an icy blade, and Kuroo could feel his knees getting weak as he threatened to collapse. Are you just going to pity yourself now? What about us? Kemma walked out of the mist to his right, and for a brief moment, Kuroo dared to be relieved until he saw the collar of his hoodie turning red as well. Blood ran effortlessly from a wound on his head, rapidly tainting his clothes and coating his pale skin. You promised me, Kuroo. You promised you would protect me. Kemma. There were tears in Kemma's eyes. He didn't even try to wipe them away as they mixed with the streams of blood, and he wept. Kemma, no, He tried to step forward and help him, but his legs gave out on him. He began to crawl over the ground, which seemed to have turned into a shallow pool of the nauseating red. Desperately, he fought forward, while Kemma appeared to become more and more distraught. He was almost there. He reached a hand out and he was gone. Panicked, he turned around, but Bokuto had vanished as well. All that was left was the crimson, tainting his skin and clothes. His breathing was shallow and he felt like he was going to vomit. I'm disappointed in you, Kuroo. Akaashi suddenly appeared behind him. He recognized him immediately by his voice. This time, he tried fighting his relief. He doubted he'd survive losing his last boyfriend as well. He sobbed silently as Akaashi walked around him. His hand closed with an iron grip around Kuroo's chin and forced him to look up. He was met with the sea-green eyes that usually were gentle and filled with compassion, but now they had turned cold. An indescribable amount of pain reflected in them, and Kuroo just knew that he had seen the same thing he did. You promised me you wouldn't offer up your life carelessly again to save our boyfriends, but you did, and it wasn't even worth it. You saved no one. How am I supposed to live with this now? You took everything from me. Tears fell from his eyes onto Kuroo's face. He desperately tried to understand and console him, but his voice was gone, when suddenly a warm sensation spread under his chin where Akaashi held him. He cast his eyes down only to watch in horror as wounds appeared on the smallest arm in real time, getting bigger and accumulating to stronger streams of blood falling from his skin. Keiji, no, Keiji. You can't save me. Apparently, you never could. He met his eyes again, trying in utter desperation to find a solution in the deep blue. No, we can bandage these. Don't you get it? I died of heartbreak. Suddenly, a much larger wound opened up in his chest, where his heart should be, and in mere seconds they both were drenched in the red liquid. When Kuroo pushed his hands onto the gash now, he already knew that it would be futile. There was no saving him. He had lost every one of them. No one remained but him. Akaashi frowned in his sleep. He could feel himself getting closer and closer to the surface of consciousness, and before he was even fully aware of it, he woke up. The room was still pitch dark as he blinked to orientate himself. No sunlight fell in through the curtains and no moonlight either. It was a new moon night, casting the room into outer darkness except from the small halo of a street lamp outside. Confused, he looked around. Usually, although lightly, he slept fairly well. Kenma still lay in his arms, perfectly calm, drooling on their pillow, and behind him echoed Bokuto's mumbling. He talked in his sleep occasionally, but Akaashi was used to that. He was just about to check on Kuroo when he already knew that something was wrong. The raven was sweating and shivering where he lay beside him. He also hadn't wrapped him in his arms anymore and made himself as small as possible on his side of the bed. Akaashi could see the tension on his face and gently reached out to massage it away, but Kuroo flinched, even in his sleep, away from the touch. He stopped. His head hung in mid-air between them as he tried to decipher what was wrong. A whimper-like sound escaped Kuroo's throat, and Akaashi froze in shock as he saw the tears spilling from his eyes. Tetsu. He tried to remain quiet not to wake the others, but he really needed to wake up Kuroo. Tetsuro. He shook him slightly by his shoulder, but it seemed in vain at first, until suddenly the toddler shot up in bed with a gasp. Akaashi froze for a second. His still sleep-riddled brain took a moment to process this. Kuroo, on the other hand, sat there, gasping for air. Akaashi expected he'd turn around any second now and explain that it was just a nightmare, but instead, he started to cry. He sobbed, quietly at first, his hands rushing up to cover his face as tears fell freely from his eyes. For a moment, Akaashi was frozen in shock, but as soon as his senses returned to him, he reached out. Kuroo flinched again, but this time he turned around rapidly and looked at him with wide eyes. The seconds ticked by as time appeared to stand still. Tetsu, what? Keiji. Kuroo's hands were shaking as they reached for him. Akaashi could feel the wetness of the tears coating his skin as he carefully, as if he was made of glass, kept his cheek and let his thumb roam over the delicate skin. Suddenly, a realization of sorts dawned on his face and his eyes widened further as he grabbed Akaashi's right arm and pushed up the sleeve, then his left. The former setter watched him perplexed and only spoke up when he pushed down the collar of his shirt to inspect his chest. Tetsu? What is going on? Are you okay? Kuroo practically collapsed against him, his head resting against his chest. He nodded weakly. His tears hadn't ceased, but he seemed to breathe a little bit more freely again. I had to make sure. I'm so sorry. Keiji, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. He sounded so broken that it effectively broke Akaashi's heart too. He didn't even have to think about it as his arms closed around the Tala. It's okay. I'm here now. It was just a dream. As soon as Kuroo felt Akaashi pulling him into his arms, he let himself fall into his boyfriend's embrace. They sat in silence for a while as Akaashi soothingly patted over his back and coaxed him to relax. He waited patiently until the sobs subsided and died down to soft sniffles. Gently, he lifted Kuroo's chin, causing him to shiver, though he wasn't sure why. When their eyes met, Kuroo's were red-rimmed and still glossed over with tears. He brought up his hand and with his sleeve wiped the tears away carefully. Tetsu, I love you so much. He leaned down to kiss his cheek. When he pulled back, he kept his face as though he was the most precious thing on earth. You are safe now. Whatever you dreamt about wasn't real, just a nightmare. Kuroo gulped, but leaned into his touch. It was rare for him to lose his voice like this, and he scarcely reminded Akaashi of the day Akema got attacked by the intruders, causing Kuroo to have a panic attack and dissociate when he couldn't find him at first. It was evident to him that he didn't want to talk about it just yet, so he simply pulled him closer again and rocked them back and forth gently. He couldn't imagine what had the other so distraught, and part of him thought he didn't want to know. In his heart, he knew that it most likely wasn't something that could be a threat to Kuroo himself. The Tala was by no means fearless, but most of his worst fears centered around others getting hurt. He thought back on how he frantically had checked his arms and chest, and his heart clenched. Instinctively, he held him tighter, his head resting just above his heart. The others are fine as well. None of us are hurt. He whispered the words, and immediately Kuroo tensed. For a moment he considered if that had been a bad decision, bringing him back to whatever horrors this night had gifted him, but... Are you sure? Akaashi felt like crying at the pain clearly evident in the way he spoke. He nodded. I'm sure. Maybe he should wake them. Kuroo clearly needed their support right now. Maybe if he... Kiji? Emma's voice was heavy with sleep. He stirred behind them, clearly woken up by all the commotion where Akaashi was supposed to be. When he turned around and Kuroo with him, Kemma was still rubbing his eyes. He looked as tired as one would if they go to bed, as late as Kemma did, and Akaashi had half a mind to tease him about it as usual, but ultimately decided against it. What's going on? Although sleep-drunk, he quickly woke up as he took in Kuroo's disheveled form and reached a hand out to them. Nightmare. He didn't know what more to say or how to explain. Perhaps he too was still a little too tired for this conversation. Kuroo reached out to the smaller as well, though instead of taking his hand, he brushed his hair aside and visibly relaxed when he found nothing amiss beneath. Tetsu. I love you. Please don't forget that. Kemma stared at him confused, but leaned into his touch nonetheless. Never. Akaashi took a deep breath. This wasn't something that looked like it could be resolved easily. Right now, all he could do was be there for him. They spent the night cuddling, Kuroo in their midst. He tried a couple of times to coax them back to sleep, assuring them that he would too, but Akaashi knew that he wouldn't. As such, they lay awake together, watching out for one another. Kuroo, whatever it is, we will never leave you. I'll be right by your side until you know that for sure. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I know this part was kinda gory in some parts, but I hope you liked it. If you did, please leave a like because it really helps the channel out, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of this. Those on my Discord might already know it, but I'm working on a lot of other series and projects already, some of which are still BokuAkaKuroKen, and if you want ships that I don't do as frequently, the best chance you got is putting in a request in the request form in the description below. Special thanks to my nerdy netcos, you help this channel out so much. Thank you so much for supporting it. Here are my other social media, you can check them out as well, though I'm most active here, and it would help me most if you click on the other videos in the end card. Now have a wonderful and amazing day, and tell me your favorite quote in the pinned comment.
Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you want to be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.